I hope this internet signal is good. All right, on this a cold, snowy winter night, we will get to the bottom of why the CCP believes it can beat the US. I just want to make sure people can hear me okay. Yes? Sorry, just want to make sure. Late is late, so I clicked on the thumbs up. All right, I guess being late wasn't bad for me. All right, I just want to make sure people can hear me okay. I want to make sure the internet signal is fine. Yes? Okay. Audio fine. Okay, good. Excellent. Let's get started. Well, thank you everyone for joining me. It's Lay's Saturday Night Live. Well, the United States boasts the world's strongest military, largest economy, and most extensive alliance network. In contrast, the Chinese Communist Party or the communist regime faces economic decline, social unrest, and political instability or division. Yet, despite these challenges, the CCP appears convinced that it can surpass the US and establish itself as the world's dominant power. Where does this confidence come from? We wonder. The answer lies in its people. This isn't just a politically correct cliche. It's the CCP's most formidable and least understood strategy. Unlike the West, where geopolitical struggles are largely confined to governments and militaries, the CCP has mobilized its entire population in an asymmetric war against the West. While Western nations' deterrence remains focused at the state level or the military level, the CCP actively engages its citizens in a widespread covert campaign targeting Western societies. This is not a conventional power struggle. It's an uneven and a deeply underestimated war game. So let's get to the bottom of the question today. Why the CCP thinks it can beat the US? I'll give you the answer. The answer lies in its asymmetric warfare. This is a term Lay coined. I think I'm the one, I don't know. If you have heard other people using the term, please let me know, but I have not seen it. I called it an asymmetric warfare. Okay, let's hear about it. When it comes to assessing how likely CCP will use military force to retake Taiwan, the views in the West are divided. One school believes that the CCP is unlikely to start a war because of a number of challenges the regime faces. One, its faltering economy with a worsening prospect when Trump's Tariff 2.0 arrives. Two, corruption in the military and defense industry has weakened the effectiveness of PLA's hardware. I talked about this just this Thursday. Three, the deadly loop of relentless political purges, low morale, and a loyalty crisis, which then generates another round of purges, low morale, and loyalty crisis, right? So it's a deadly loop. And the last is officials' overall passive attitude and inaction at grassroots level. So we've talked about these four challenges that CCP faces, extensively in the past years, if you follow my channel. However, so you should think that the CCP, isn't confident in launching an attack on Taiwan or being engaged in a serious confrontation with the United States. However, the other school of thought believes that CCP's threat is ever more dangerous now, and they argue that these economic, personnel, or hardware weaknesses aren't enough to deter CCP because the regime has never aimed to win based on pure military or economic strength. The CCP's strategy is a comprehensive confrontation known as unrestricted warfare. And military combat, military confrontation is only a small part of it. Although it has met with some setbacks, the CCP is still confident in its strategies. So let's first understand what gives the CCP the confidence. Well, a 2022 Chinese essay titled, "Why is the US Destined to Lose to China?" explains the concept. So it opens by saying this. It says, why is the US destined to lose to China? Because the standards for victory and defeat between China and the US are different. The two countries have different levels of tolerance for losses. The two countries have different levels of tolerance for losses, and their threshold for admitting defeat is also different. The author used the Korean War as an example. So China lost 1 million lives in the war and still considered it a victory. But for the US, losing 100,000 lives meant total defeat. In a 2016 article published on Sina military website, which has a similar title called "Why China Will Win Over the US," a Chinese author, who I think is a military strategist, echoed the view in the 2022 article by arguing that the fact that the underdog China was bold enough to fight the much superior US military in Korea and forced the Americans to make a concession was a victory for the Chinese. According to the Chinese authors, their success was that they were able to divide the Korean peninsula into halves. And so from that perspective, the Chinese think they win. Now, we know that in 1957 in Moscow, Mao Zedong advocated for a nuclear war. He stated that losing half of the world's population wasn't a big deal, and China would still have 300 million people left. The author of the 2022 essay argued that China's willingness to lose half of its people to win a war is its standard for victory and a measure of its war potential. So this person wrote, quote, if China lost 300 million, if China loses, I should say, if China loses 300 million people, the CCP will still be the party, and the CCP leader will still be the leader, perhaps even greater than before, or perhaps even with greater power than before. But if the US lost 100,000 people, the public would protest against the war, vote for another party, and the president would be forced to step down. And it went on to say, judging by the Iraq War, Americans have become more and more afraid of casualties. If 10,000 Americans were killed, the US would surrender. And the Chinese author called Americans psychologically fragile. Okay, so to the CCP, this is American weakness they can take advantage of. So let me go back to what, okay, so I'm reading from the article again. So it goes on by saying, when it comes to economic warfare, the Americans are even more vulnerable. Can Americans survive on eating grass? In fact, it would never even reach that point. If the unemployment rate exceeds 6%, the president would be forced out and the US would have to admit defeat. So the article concluded that Americans would surrender if their country loses 10,000 lives and unemployment exceeds 6%. And for that reason, the author concluded that the US is destined to lose and China is destined to win. I brought up this article to show you that the ongoing US-China competition, confrontation, whatever you call that, has never been and will never be a symmetrical game. It's asymmetrical warfare. It's not a competition between two governments. It's not war between two militaries. The CCP has weaponized its people against the West. So let me give you an example. Meng Liangzhu was a successful battle often quoted in the CCP's military science and history books. It was during the Civil War in 1947. 200,000 poorly equipped CCP troops defeated the ROC nationalists' 600,000 well-equipped elite troops. So how did the CCP defeated its opponent? That's three sides of them. Well, during the first wave of attack, the PLA used elderly people as human shields in front of their troops. The nationalist soldiers couldn't open fire on the grandpas and grandmas. This allowed the PLA to advance. During the second wave, the PLA used children and made another advancement. The most dramatic was when the PLA used naked women to walk in front of their soldiers. By then, the nationalist soldiers completely lost their will to fight because they're mentally troubled. And so they lost the battle. This defeat was significant that it affected the morale of the nationalists. And from there on, they lost a number of other battles and eventually lost the Civil War and retreated to Taiwan. So in the history of human wars, military fights military. Civilians are left alone. But the CCP has taken Chinese citizens as hostage on its war wagon. So it's American government. So American government is up against the CCP regime plus the Chinese people. And the American military will be up against the Chinese PLA plus the Chinese people. So on the battlefield, the CCP has taken the Chinese people along and used them as human shield to fight off the enemies. In geopolitical battlegrounds, the CCP has also used its people as agents to spy and infiltrate opponents. This has been going on for decades while we looked away. This is what I mean an asymmetrical warfare. And the worst is the CCP uses its people to target our people. So what's throwing off the equation or the balance is the people on both sides. Now, the CCP's confidence in battling the West stems from the success of this covert playbook. You see, the West lacks good understanding of CCP's asymmetrical war by using of civilians, right? Or using civilians. Of course, time has changed, and it's difficult for the CCP to copy what they did in the 1940s by forcing the civilians to join them in the battlefield, like what they did in the 1940s. But the concept still holds true. The same things have happened in a more covert manner. Let's take a look at some of the latest events in 2025, and you'll see what I mean, or you'll understand why I'm so concerned. First is DeepSeek, which is a Chinese high-tech copycat whose claim of technological supremacy in AI has now been debunked. However, its tremendous success wasn't technical, but rather causing panic in global financial markets, which triggered a sell-off that wiped out nearly $1 trillion in market value. There are reports indicating that Chinese state-linked social media accounts actively promoted DeepSeek's AI models and amplified DeepSeek's release across platforms like X, Facebook, Instagram, and also other Chinese media platforms. So in my opinion, Chinese state-affiliated entities, both online and offline, leveraged coordinated strategies to generate significant attention for DeepSeek's AI models. Through a team of online social media accounts and offline so-called experts and KOLs, The CCP influence operation in the West successfully manipulated public sentiment and influenced market dynamics. You can't say the CCP was not successful. It doesn't care about casualties or the price it paid, nor the future of DeepSeek. It's just happy that it caused harm, just like the Korean War, right? We can't use Western values to assess its success, but if you go by their definition of victory, they think they're successful because they don't care the cost or the casualties. And another set of examples is South Korea and Taiwan, which I discussed recently. The CCP is successful in bringing great political turmoil in both countries and has effectively controlled the parliament of Taiwan and South Korea. By doing so, Beijing was successful in meddling Taiwan and South Korea's internal affairs, such as drastically cutting defense budgets and paralyzing certain government functions. You can watch my program released last night, comparing Taiwan's parliamentary political struggle or crisis to that of South Korea. So you wonder how Beijing is able to do that. Well, in South Korea, the CCP uses the large number of Chinese Koreans or Korean Chinese. One is ethnic Chinese, who live in Korea, and the other is ethnic Koreans who live in China, who used to live in China, who was born in China, but maybe live in Korea now. So the CCP used them to influence Korean media, politicians, and other KOLs. In Taiwan, they do it a little differently. They offer Taiwanese business opportunity. They offer Taiwanese business opportunities in China that they can refuse. They also control the mainland Chinese community in Taiwan, which is mostly Chinese women who married Taiwanese men. It's a significant number because a lot of Taiwanese men went to mainland China to find a wife. So not just Taiwan and South Korea, if you look around, almost all countries recently are experiencing some levels of the problems of some levels of the problems. What am I going to say? They're all experiencing the problem of having Chinese spies. So the Philippines recently arrested 5 suspected Chinese spies, and the Commissioner of Immigration warned its people of Chinese spy activities. And some of these spies have lived in the Philippines for 2 decades. So they're not newcomers. They have been there for a long time. And then on February 4th, a former Google software engineer was hit with additional charges by the US Department of Justice for stealing Google's AI trade secrets to benefit the CCP. So a Chinese citizen by the name of Ding Lingwei was arrested in California last March. He is charged with 7 counts of espionage and 7 counts of trade secret theft. And then there's a man by the name of John Harold Rogers, who is a former senior advisor at the Federal Reserve, US Federal Reserve. He was arrested last month for allegedly leaking insider information to Chinese intelligence in exchange for at least $450,000. Also last month, this is January, German prosecutors indicted 3 people for allegedly spying for China by obtaining information about military technology. So this is just a very small list of the Chinese spies that are being announced to media. And one of my fans forwarded me a video on X showing a US Navy recruiting office in Alhambra, California, that's staffed entirely by Chinese recruiters. The working language in the office is exclusively Chinese. A US Navy recruiter whose last name is Wang used WeChat as the primary means of contact or communication. And also a previous video shared by the author who released the video to YouTube showed a Chinese American military member stating that he would refuse to fight against China, suggesting a potential conflict of interest. It seems that these recruits still identify with the PRC and not the US. When I watched the video, the entire office feels like a community affairs office in mainland China, not a military recruiting office in California. So, I mean, people should be alarmed. There are a number of national security risks here, right? Espionage threat, so potential infiltration of the US Navy by Chinese operatives, data vulnerabilities, the use of WeChat for recruitment, which is controlled by the CCP. And it could expose military personnel data to the CCP. Divided loyalties, right? Recruits may refuse to fight against China in a future conflict. And then influence operations. It could be a possible CCP effort to plant sympathizers or agents within the US military. So, I mean, other risks include information leaks, sabotage, or subversion from within the military. So, regarding the cases, the examples I gave you, the commonality that connects them all is CCP's control of ethnic Chinese around the world. You know, if there's one commonality, that's what it is. Even in cases similar to the one involving the senior advisor at Federal Reserve, I mean, he's a Western guy, he's not a Chinese. But these individuals were first approached by overseas Chinese. I mean, if they work at the Federal Reserve, I mean, the initial contact is established with someone who's based, a Chinese based in the US. So CCP's tight grip on the Chinese communities around the world is a serious national security risk. And this risk is difficult to counter because because you don't know who is who, and you can't say Chinese are all spies and therefore reject them, right? And the hostility in the West towards the Chinese can be a touchy subject. And so this is precisely the reason why I said this needs to be addressed. I have said repeatedly in the past that the United States needs to include the Chinese people in the equation in its strategy to counter the CCP, or they will not win. So that brings us to the question. Hopefully I have already presented the case to you why this is an asymmetrical warfare, right? And why it's strategically important for the United States to include the Chinese people in this overall in its overall strategy. But it's difficult. How to do it? Well, I think the US government should support the Chinese in two areas without getting themselves into controversy. Because this is not a concept that the West is used to. Because the West is like, okay, government to government, military to military, you leave my people out, I leave your people out. But that's not the game the CCP is playing. It's using its people to target your people. And if you leave out the peoples, you're going to lose. And this is precisely what happened in 1948 when the Kuomintang, the nationalists, lost to the CCP. That's the battle example I gave you, the Menglianggu battle, where the CCP won its opponent. That's three sides. That's three sides of itself. So the question is, how do we do it? It's the West. I know the Western experts feel like their hands are tied. because they're not used to this concept. Well, I think if you think about how the CCP is able to control the Chinese, there are two reasons. One is they brainwash the Chinese, and the second is the Chinese people have been disconnected from their cultural heritage. So I think the first thing they must do, the West must do, is to help the Chinese reconnect with their cultural heritage. Help the Chinese start a cultural revival campaign. When I say the Chinese are disconnected from their cultural heritage, I mean the culture you see in today's China, in today's mainland China, isn't Chinese culture. It's a communist culture. The whole purpose of the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s was to destroy traditional Chinese culture so the CCP can control people, can brainwash them. I'll just give you, the Chinese understand, and they understand the significance of this. Just today, I saw a Chinese scholar lamenting on internet that young women who don't argue or fight, who are not materialistic or overly anxious, who are sweet with a genuine smile from their heart, have become extinct in China. He said that such a young woman does not exist in China. They're gone. You can't find one. And this is because everyone in their parents' generation fights, argues, is overly materialistic, and prone to nervous breakdowns due to their hardship in life. So he said, how can such parents raise children who give a sweet smile coming from their heart? He said, this is very hard. It's impossible. I think what he said is very true, but very sad. And the only way the Chinese people can break off the CCP's control is by rediscovering who they are and be reunited again with their cultural heritage. Otherwise, they are, like the Chinese say, we are so poor that the only thing we have is money. This is the expression that the Chinese use to describe their their society devoid of culture, devoid of civilization. So they used to say this, but now they don't even have money, right? They say we're so poor that the only thing we have is money, but now they don't even have money, so they literally have nothing. So, and there's one group that's doing that. That's the New York-based Xijinping Performing Arts. The Chinese Performing Arts group is touring around the world. Their tagline is "See China Before Communism." However, they've been subject to bomb threats, malicious attacks. I mean, the CCP agents living in this country are trying to shut down their performances. I have a fan, his name is Chris too. He's from Canada. He emailed me today with a burning question. He said, Lei, a couple of days ago, I heard Shenyun in New York is currently being investigated by the law. I think he's saying that by the US government. Is that true? If so, do you think Trump and particularly Elon Musk, are working with the CCP? Well, what I want to say, that's precisely the rumor the CCP is spreading. See, the CCP wants people to believe that Shenyun is being investigated by Trump and the US government. And they want you to believe that Trump and Elon Musk are somehow working with the CCP. It's part of its strategy. I talked about this before. So stopping the Shenyun tour or the Shenyun performance is so important to the CCP because it doesn't want the Chinese to discover its culture, because it understands once the Chinese people realize, wow, this is my culture, I'm so proud of my culture, I'm actually proud of my country, then they're finished. By the way, the New York Times has done 10 hit pieces on Shen Yun and Falun Gong in, I think, in the last 10 months, or maybe less than 10 months. You wonder why the Times is so obsessive or so obsessively against a Chinese dance company. Come on. They're just the performing arts group. I mean, who is so against the arts? I mean, One Piece, yeah, maybe, what's wrong with the New York Times is so against a performing arts group comprised of people who are being persecuted in China. It just defies logic. I mean, there are a lot of things being found about the New York Times now. So who knows? Maybe it has got money from the CCP. By the way, its executive editor was once based in China, and he married a Chinese. Yeah, the New York Times executive director has a Chinese wife. Someone said that he's tied to the Jiang Zemin faction. Jiang Zemin is the one who ordered the persecution of Falun Gong. And they say, judged by how the New York Times reports China news, they could tell that it's tied to the Jiang Zemin faction. It's not necessarily tied to the Xijinping faction, but I think the Wall Street Journal is more tied to the Xijinping faction. So that's just about the Western media. But judging by how paranoid the New York Times is, you know that Shen Yun is doing the right thing for the Chinese and the Americans, because there's such a strong there is a growing anti-China sentiment in the US. And it's, how do you address that, right? It's precisely because the CCP has taken the Chinese people hostage and used the Chinese Americans to do things for them. So it's natural that Americans, or some Americans, do not like what these Chinese do. So there is growing anti-Chinese sentiment. Even I get hate emails from Americans who just do not like the Chinese. I ask them to watch my programs, and they don't. They hate everyone. Anyways, so what Shen Yun's programs harmonize the anxiety and the hostility that the West has about the Chinese. And their program present China before communism. So I think it's a very gentle way to harmonize that, to neutralize that. So that's one thing the US government need to do. I mean, any program that help the Chinese to be reconnected with their culture will help the Chinese to think independently, to break free from the CCP. And the second thing is break the CCP's internet firewall. This is important. The only reason the CCP can still control the Chinese is by controlling the internet, by censoring the internet. In order to brainwash them, while history is altered, Chinese textbooks are filled with fake history. And for that reason, the internet must be tightly controlled. And please don't assume Chinese Americans who have lived in the West for decades don't have the CCP mentalities. Some of the first generation Chinese Americans, children who are born to immigrant parents from China, are still influenced by their parents. We've seen famous Chinese Americans exhibiting this problem. So do not assume that Chinese Americans born in the US or Chinese Canadians or Chinese Australians are not subject to CCP's indoctrination. When it comes to China, many of these individuals are influenced by their parents' view. And their parents still consume contents coming from WeChat. And they're still watching CCTV's program. And they're still reading Chinese, CCP propaganda newspapers. So it's very bad. Now there are technologies out there that can do this, like VPN, proxy tools. Elon Musk's Starlink and the like can certainly break the Chinese firewall. There are global internet freedom technologies, such as there's an organization called Global Internet Freedom Consortium. It's a nonprofit established in 2006 and has played a role in advancing internet freedom. in countries like China, Iran, and Burma. I like their logo. It says, there's no freedom without freedom of information. And there's no freedom of information without internet freedom. So to summarize, the West and the CCP are playing two different games. If we go by Western perspective, the CCP is no match for the United States and its allies in terms of collective economic and military strength. However, the CCP believes it still has a chance to win because it knows how to take an advantage of West's weaknesses and manipulate its people. So I think it's time the West changes its definition and standard for warfare and develops effective countermeasures. I hope today's talk is a starting point. That's all I have for you tonight. This program took me over 2 weeks to think over. It took me, almost 3 weeks to think over. And I'm glad that I did it tonight. All right, let me see what people have for me. Okay, all right, let's see. Let me quickly go through the colors, the super stickers. Oh, by the way, I thank everyone for subscribing to my new channel. I think I got over 1,000 subs as of this morning. But in terms of watch time, I have not met the threshold yet. I think one program probably isn't enough to do it. I think I need to have more views. But at least we're halfway there. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the program. All right, let me see. So, all right. Let me see. Oh, here's a question from Daniel McGinnis. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for your continued support. I appreciate it. Okay, I also want to thank here B Dub. Thank you, B. I love that. Thank you. I love the fact that your name is so short and it's easy for me. Scipio Africanus. Thank you, Scipio. Am I pronouncing it right? All right, okay. So here we go. Let's see what questions people have for me. I hope people, okay, here's a question from Mitch. I came here late. There's another account you have made. Yes, I have another channel called Lay's Looking Glass. It's a culture channel. Check it out. Google Lay's Looking Glass. Chris, if you can provide the link in the description so that people can check it out, I'd appreciate that. Thank you, Chris. All right, here's a question forwarded by Chris from Elian. What are your thoughts on the TikTok transition to Red Note? Do you think that this will be exploited, or will the Chinese people create a sincere connection? I think the fave was short-lived, because there's no way the Chinese government will allow Chinese people and American people to genuinely engage with each other on one platform. It's utterly, this is like you put a dent. This is like you poke a hole in the firewall, right? Because if you allow Americans to talk with the Chinese directly, then they can fill Chinese in on what's happening around the world. This is a big no-no. So unless Red Note develops a standalone program just for the Americans, I don't think the Chinese government will allow this to happen. And there are already a number of accounts, like, the Americans are already finding out that their accounts have been suspended because they shared pricing information in the West. They shared their income. One guy who said that he makes $50 an hour as a construction worker, his account was suspended because that's too much information to disclose. according to the CCP. So the Americans I think, will quickly be annoyed by the fact that they can't see anything. I mean, if you're being banned, then what's the point of staying on the platform? But there are CCP-sponsored accounts active promoting this influx of American users on RedNote. The infiltration on our social media platforms by CCP accounts is very pervasive. Yeah, they're very active now. They're all out. So, all right, here's a question. I answered that question. All right, thank you. Oh, here's Ty Freeborn, TY Freeborn. Thank you for your insight and contribution to dialogue. I watch a few on China and always appreciate your input. Well, thank you. I try my best. All right. Okay, let's see. Galia, thank you for your wonderful analysis. Can we consider last crash on US aid by Musk as a help for China expanding the Belt and Road Initiative, as there won't be American aid anymore globally? No, I don't worry, because the Belt and Road Initiative is also bankrupt. It's because China doesn't have the money. The Belt and Road Initiative has become the base for recently there was a story in Thailand. There's a Chinese actor who was abducted in Thailand to Myanmar, and then they have these cyber scam labor camps that they set up, that the Chinese set up, targeting the Chinese. And they say that there's a correspondence with these cyber scam labor camps and Belt and Road initiatives. A lot of the industrial parks that they built along the Belt and Road turned out to be these labor camps that abducts Chinese nationals to do cyber scams. So it's falling apart. I think the Belt and Road Initiative is falling apart. So I wouldn't worry about that. Okay, questions from Chris forwarded. Wheezy Squeeze book. Okay, is that why the CCP banned Chinese costume drama that are based on actual Chinese history and set in a specific historical period? What do you mean by Chinese costume dramas? Because you capitalize that. I don't know, what do you mean Chinese costume dramas? There are a lot of classical Chinese stories or dramas about Chinese history that they banned because modern day Chinese have a hard time expressing their political views or beliefs. So what they relied on historical anecdotes or drama to express their views and opinions. So it becomes very subtle, right? You can't, because you could say anything you want if the set is Ming Dynasty, right? So the Chinese artists are doing that, and for that reason they're banned, because it's too sensitive. Richard Hinman, well, thank you, Richard, for the support. Norbert Klotz, with all of the changes in the last 15 months, will a war with Taiwan more or less likely? All of the manufacturing and planning happened before the changes. I don't think so. I don't think it's going to happen. Because like I said on Thursday, the hardware, I mean, if you start a war, you need to have hardware. But the Chinese military hardwares are good for shows. They're good for publicity. Are they really reliable? I think that the PLA themselves, the PLA officers, They know that themselves. They know it's no good. Xi Jinping probably doesn't know. I think Xi Jinping has been told so many lies. He does not know that these weapons, these hardwares are a joke. So I really don't think that a war will break out. Yeah, I serious. I think the chances for a war to break out, a military attack, I mean, that's what I mean, is very, very small. But that doesn't mean the CCP isn't trying to take Taiwan from within through other means. Look at what happened in Taiwan and South Korea. Actually, the House Speaker, or the equivalent of House Speaker of South Korea, is in China right now. Yeah, he just met with Xi Jinping yesterday. I think the Xi Jinping is very happy with the latest development, the political development in South Korea. Someone said, "Did you know the firewall is built by Bill Gates for the CCP?" I know it was built. The Cisco contributed to that. I didn't know Bill Gates built that. Not good. Not looking good. All right, let's see. Someone, you said that you have another account. Are you talking about China in this new account? I talk about Chinese culture in that account. So the one I released is about feng shui. I'm making a feng shui series. It's very interesting. The first one is more about culture, although I will also touch on geopolitics. I want to talk about the presidential palaces in the presidential palace in the world that has the worst feng shui. So it's mostly culture oriented. It's about China. Um, it's cultural program about China, but sometimes with a political twist, with a geopolitical twist. Okay, let me see. Your mic is failing you. Is that the case? Oh, my mic is failing me. Sorry, audio. Oh, the audio is not good.
Okay, is this better? Yeah, I think this is better. Uh-oh, I didn't do the right mic. Sorry. I think this must be good. All right. Hand together. Do we have those CCP police in the US? Yes, we do. Actually, they are actually secretly doing trials. Not only there police here, there's also Chinese court operating in the US. And they secretly put people on trial in the US. They carry out law enforcement in the US as if this is their territory. It's scary. Okay, Jenda Giada, what they think about Europe in China. You really speak about the relationship with Europe. Well, China is trying to befriend Europe while confronts the U.S. China is trying to tear apart the Europe-U.S. ally. That's its strategy for during the Biden administration. I don't know what it's going to do right now, but it's certainly friendly towards countries like France. But all of CCP's diplomatic efforts have been devoted to the U.S. It understands the U.S. is its number one opponent. So right now, I don't think Europe is that important to the CCP right now. I think Japan is important, South Korea is important, and the U.S. is important because they understand, the CCP understands with Trump in the White House, Trump is going to steer his focus to the Pacific region. And so with that in the works, in the planning, Japan, South Korea, even the Philippines, Southeast Asian countries are all important. Okay. Is my microphone on or off? Can you guys hear me? Maybe I'll end it here. Okay, I'll end it here. All right, well, I thank you for joining me. Maybe my mic doesn't work very well. Oh, the sound is, yeah, because I was using an external mic. I forgot to set it up. Yeah, this mic is much better. All right, I'll end it here. Thank you very much. I will see you next week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye-bye.